Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War news update, first part thereof for the 13th of December 2023. A couple of housekeeping notes. One, I'm going to do a last minute kind of random live with Greg Terry from the Greg Terry Experience. We were just chatting on WhatsApp and it was like, man, you're up early. Okay, do you want to do live? So possibly about 1 o'clock my time, which is a couple of hours from now, time of recording 3 hours from now-ish. So keep your eyes peeled for a live today if you want to while away your time listening to us Twitter on. And also, I love this from James Cottle, who's a great supporter of the channel. Oops, not that, this one. JP, just thought I should let you know, after a year of hard work and dedicated training, I now watch all of your footage at 1.75 times speed, and it sounds perfectly normal to me. I feel like I should get some kind of certificate. So he is actually receiving, as we speak now, a virtual certificate, and by virtual, I mean it's imaginary. So it just should be arriving in his brain now as he listens to this. The certificate is for most awesome, quick listener in the universe, 2023, so he's just got that before the 2024 nominations start flowing in. It is actually, I think, really cool for people to do this. I listen to most things on 1.75 to 2 times speed, whether it be audio books, whether it be podcasts, whether it be YouTube videos. So all my YouTube videos are on quick. At least some comedy ones I listen to, you need the kind of timing there, so I put them down to 1.25 or 1.5. But generally everything is on quicker because I only have so much time in a day. If you can get used to listening to me quicker, not only can you listen to more content, but actually I sound better. I do a lot of umming and ahhing, and I struggle to find words like right now. Because of my brain not being quite as good as it used to be. It's part of the symptom smorgasbord that comes with having progressive multiple sclerosis. So my brain doesn't work very well, and my word selection is not great. So listen to me on 1.5. Start off slow, 1.25, 1.5, 1.75, and I am smooth as you like, just rat-a-tat-tat, getting those facts out there, spitting facts, whatever. Right, let's go on to where we should be starting, which is the general staff figures for Ukraine, Russian losses for the day before. All the caveats apply to this. You can find them in the description to the video below. First thing to note is that, just making sure that's the right day, yep, 13th, 850 personnel is a couple of hundred below where we have seen it. Well, we have seen it get up to about 1,300, so arguably 500 below those incredibly high numbers. But if I think about 1,000 being a really good day for the Ukrainians. So 850 is towards that, is not as low as sort of 300s where we have seen it. And even during the early parts of the counteroffensive, we were looking at sort of 300 to 600. This is good for Ukraine, and I think it shows that Russia is pressuring, because I think most of these casualties are as a result of Russian attacks as opposed to Ukrainian attacks. So when the Russians go on the attack, they lose troops. So it's almost like you want the Russians to go on the attack. Now, what's happening up and down the front line doesn't look good. If you're concentrating on the kind of micro mapping side of things, Russia are advancing pretty much everywhere apart from Dnipro River. And in all of those places, as they take kilometers, they lose huge amounts of troops. So you can look at the loss of territory in a positive light if you so want, because actually it means that they would be exhausting themselves, arguably unnecessarily, depending on where they're attacking and why they're attacking. But anyway, that's how I would see it. I'm not so worried about territorial gain for the Russians at the moment, as long as that territorial gain comes with a great attrition to their forces. 18 tanks is a huge number of tanks to lose in a single day, 15 APVs as well. 3 artillery systems is interesting because we are seeing fewer and fewer artillery pieces being taken out on a daily basis, and I don't know whether that is significant or not. as we are seeing the Russians attack, maybe we are. I guess the Ukrainians are being focused on taking out those APVs and tanks as they're attacking with their troops in some kind of combined arms maneuver. Maybe that's taking away from the Ukrainians hitting further back at artillery pieces, or the Russians are simply running lower on those and there are just fewer artillery pieces up and down the front line. I don't know. Be interested to see what you think. 10 drones. That would be from last night, the night before, more than last night. 12 vehicles and fuel tanks and 6 pieces of special equipment. Fairly average L. So those 6 pieces of special equipment is pretty decent. Okay, as we go to look at Andrew Perpetua's totting up of the losses for the day before, you can see that there is about a 2-to-1 ratio of Russian to Ukrainian losses, which is good for Ukraine. Not as good as it can be, but not as bad as having parity or the Ukrainians losing more. So what do we have here? The Ukrainians have lost a drone buggy, M777, M109, and a B-21 Grad, BM-21 Grad. So that's a multiple launch rocket system, a couple of bits of artillery. Other than that, possibly a Bradley and an old M113, but fairly low value equipment. Otherwise, when we look at the Russian losses, comm equipment, BM-21 themselves, and another bit of artillery there. There's a couple of 4 tanks actually, of varying types, and then going back to a few IFVs and APCs, military trucks, and a lot of civilian kit as well. As in, I say civilian kit, things like Bukankas and SUVs being used by the military to transport. So all in, the Russians have obviously lost more than the Ukrainians. That'll be more painful for the Russians, but it's not any super high value stuff lost for the Russians. But it does go to show that they just are losing large numbers of pieces of equipment on a daily basis. Now, there's quite a bit of statistics being released at the moment. The war with Ukraine has cost Russia 315,000 eliminated or wounded military personnel. That's nearly 90%, I think it's 87% of the personnel the Russian army had when the invasion began, a source familiar with the US intelligence told Reuters. In addition, Moscow's losses in personnel and armored vehicles have set the Russian military modernization back 18 years. Wow, and this is why I say Russia would not be able to do anything else after this war. Even if they prevail in some way in this war, which I think is broadly impossible, Russia would be in all sorts of military trouble, having exhausted their stocks of pretty much everything. So 315,000 dead and injured troops, 90% of the personnel it had when the conflict began. And so that is, the source said the recently declassified US intelligence report assessed that Russia began its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022 with 360,000 personnel. Since then, as mentioned, 315,000 lost. The Russian army began the war with 3,100 tanks, lost 2,200 of them, and has had to backfill that force with T-62 tanks produced in the 1970s, leaving it only 1,300 tanks on the battlefield. The source quoted a report as saying, Kyiv treats its losses as a state secret, and officials say disclosing the figure could harm the war effort. A New York Times report in August, so a few months old, cited US officials as putting the Ukrainian death toll at close to 70,000. Make of that what you will. CNN also reports on figures from Avdiivka. So, since launching its offensive in October, we assess that so this is again the same declassified intelligence report, I believe. We assess that the Russian military, has suffered more than 13,000 casualties along the Avdiivka-Novopavlivka axis and over 220 combat vehicle losses, the equivalent to 6 maneuver battalions in equipment alone. I mean, that's incredible. But Putin still aims to conquer Ukraine. Its attempts at an offensive has resulted in no strategic gains, though, in that area. And actually, that 220 combat vehicle losses, those, I think, are the lowest. That's the lowest end of the range, because that, I think, refers to essentially visually confirmed. So that's your bare minimum is 220. You do see claims of 330, actually, I've seen claims of. Now, if we look, Tendar says, I'm going through the latest batch of videos and pictures coming from the Avdiivka front, and they show absolute carnage among Russian troops. We already exceeded the amount of Russian losses from Vuhledar some weeks ago, but the last few days severely increased this already staggering figure, with literally no gains in land at all. Avdiivka appears to be currently the single largest contributor to progressing Russia's demographic catastrophe. And this is arguably true. So, when you look at these daily figures, what proportion of the 850 personnel lost is coming from Avdiivka? On a daily basis, Avdiivka, I think, is responsible for most of, or it could be half of, the Russian losses, just that one place. It's absolutely incredible. Tatarigami's updated their documentation of visually confirmed losses, and they are now over 200 visually confirmed. The last count was 109. This time the total is over 200 in Avdiivka alone. Okay, so that is devastating for the Russians there. And then Tendar produced a video here, so I can't play it. It's basically a video of Russian bodies littered everywhere. This video from Avdiivka is only 2 minutes 48 seconds long, but I counted 97 dead Russians. So every time I rewatch it, I see another body which I missed before. Of course, all of the videos I link in this the first two segments here, the strikes and the hits and losses, are, or as I put up there, hots and losses. Hits and losses are in the description below, so you can watch them at your leisure. Obviously, be warned, some of them will be pretty hard to watch. It's also worth knowing that there are areas on the front line where the Russians are absolutely hammering the Ukrainians. So if you look at Andrew Perpetua's live stream last night, we know that up near Sinkivka, or Sinkivka itself, is being properly hammered by Russian artillery, multiple launch rocket systems, mortars, aviation, and that includes helicopters. It is getting absolutely flattened, and that, in certain videos there you can see a lot of, well, actually no, not so much there. Bodanivka area north of Bakhmut, there are videos where you can see a lot of a lot of Ukrainian bodies. So there are certain places where it's hard for both sides. I think North Bakhmut is hard for Ukraine, and you'll see them effectively operationally withdraw from there, I think, going forward. Well, they kind of have been for some time now. So it's hard for Ukrainians there, hard for them in Sinkivka as well, right in the north. So yeah, for every time I say there are some pretty horrific video imagery of Russian losses, remember that can be the same for the Ukrainians too. Now, I talked about BTR-90 over the last couple of days, just the fact that that's been blown up and there's only 14 of these on the books in prototype form. And I talked about, is it there? Does it signify that the Russians are pretty desperate and bringing up prototypes to the front line? And someone else has argued a couple of times that no, that it's more likely that it's being tested. And then other people have come back to say, no, it's definitely not being tested. It is much more likely, my theory here. So here, Robert says, limited numbers have been produced and are in service with the National Guard of Russia. In October 2011, the Ministry of Defense refused to buy the BTR-90 and did not include them in a list of the state program of armament until 2020, and waived exports for the BTR-90. Subsequently, the Russian army chose to assemble a large number of BTR-82A. The combat effectiveness has already increased significantly, and it's derived from the BTR-80. The development cost of the BTR-82A is omitted, and the production cost is cheaper, making a less advanced BTR-90 even less likely to change its fate. In other words, they wouldn't be testing prototypes of BTR-90 if they're not going to make them, because they're A, more expensive, and B, not as technically good as BTR-82A. And so therefore, you wouldn't be bringing them onto the front line to test them. So then it goes back to, well, then why are we seeing BTR-90, prototype BTR-90s on the front line? Again, it's almost certainly because they are desperate for vehicles. So the 2015 Moscow Victory Parade exposed the next generation VPK 7829 boomerang wheeled armored vehicle and officially announced that the BTR 90 program could no longer be resurrected. So they are not there to be tested, and they were never taken into production. Russia preferred the BTR 82A. It'd be nice to know the decision was based on quality, functionality, or pricing, or both. And then someone else adds the same thing. The BTR 90 was obsolete a while ago. Russians chose to modify their existing BTR 80 stockpile, etc., etc. All the same kind of stuff. What they should be testing is a VPK 7829 boomerang or the Kurganets 25 IFVs on the battlefield if they were interested in testing new systems. So, seeing a BTR 90 is just telling us that they are desperate for anything to throw onto the battlefield. So that, again, go back to the original point. When we see this stuff on the battlefield, it suggests that they are desperate. Now, this can then be said about the footage like this. So Russian losses on the left bank of Kherson. Here we have 4 Russian T-72B3Ms, OBR 2022. So what this means is these are ones that have been updated in 2022. They've taken T-72s and kind of refurbished them. So if you see 4 of these destroyed in Krinky, that tells you that they are using these latest versions. And I'm not sure, it could also be that that upgrade is lacking anyway due to sanctions and whatnot. So again, what do we learn when we see certain patterns emerging from the battlefield, from BDAs, from battlefield damage assessments? I would suggest again here that they have cycled through an awful lot of tanks and starting to see 2022 variants lost is probably an indication that they are bringing more recent refurbishments onto the field. Just like we're seeing a lack of BMP ones now because they've basically attrited most of those away. That as they're refurbishing things, they are refurbishing things that need fundamental rebuilding, so they're going to choose the better ones to rebuild, which is not going to be the BMP1. If you're going to rebuild anything, not just dust it off and tighten a few nuts here and there. If you're going to properly rebuild, have to rebuild them because you've exhausted all your easily refurbished stuff, then you're going to rebuild the better things. So you'll rebuild your BMDs or your BMP2s and 3s. And if you're spending time rebuilding them and sending them to the front line and you're seeing those get attrited and not BMP1s, it means that, in my book, the BMP1s have been attrited away. Generally, I mean, you're still going to see them, but statistically. Right. Then I just thought it's worth pulling this one up. So this is a HIMARS strike on a Russian Supercam UAV team. So you've got basically an SUV with a couple of guys operating a Supercam drone. Now, it's interesting that you would use a HIMARS to hit this, but of course, HIMARS can do time-sensitive stuff. So you can drive, shoot, scoot. All right. It might be that it can get there it can get to a firing point much quicker than a piece of artillery. That might not be an artillery range. It's going to be likely far behind the lines, so you're unable to be hit with artillery. Is it worth hitting with a HIMARS? Yes, because it's not about the value of what's being hit, but it's about the potential damage that thing can bring about. So this Supercam drone can spot for all sorts of things, maybe spot for Russian missiles on a Ukrainian airfield, taking out some MiGs or whatever, or Su-24s or whatever it is, or is it spotting for X, Y, and Z, then a HIMARS missile taking out this team is super important and it's good value for money. As well as that, you've got the drone expertise being taken out if those people perish. And HIMARS pretty much landing on top of this team here is, I would argue, the end of that team. Okay, moving on to distance standoff munitions. We have last night another attack, not a massive saturation attack. 10 out of 10 ballistic missiles are shot down and 10 out of 10 drones as well. So this is a fairly small scale attack. We're still not seeing the large scale strikes. And these are ballistic missiles, not cruise missiles. What is going on with the lack of cruise missiles? Are they really waiting for some massive saturation? Why hasn't that happened already? Surely they'd want to do that at the beginning of winter, so that the winter cold, if they're going to hit energy infrastructure, it is affected now rather than when it's too late. What is the reason? I don't know. But we have seen 10 ballistic missiles sent, and interesting that all 10 were shot down. Now, I would guess that the ballistic missiles were the ones sent against Kyiv, and having 100% interception rate for ballistic missiles means that it probably is Kyiv, because that's where you've got your best air defense systems, like your Patriots, like your SAMP-Ts, that can shoot down ballistic missiles. Russia attacked Kyiv with 10 ballistic missiles, injuring 53 people, including at least 6 children, according to the mayor, Vitaly Klitschko. And here we have more sort of footage and information. At least 20 people were taken to the hospital, including 2 children, and that's the Dniprovsky district in Kyiv. Missile debris. So it's not. The problem is you shoot these big missiles down as they're coming down very fast, ballistic missiles at a probably quite a steep trajectory. You shoot them down. That's all coming down still. It just might not hit the target, but it's still gonna come down and hit parts of Kyiv, right? Unfortunately, you can't vaporize the missile in midair. So the missile debris damaged the facade of a high-rise building. One of the balconies caught fire. At least 8 cars were burning when the firefighters arrived. A total of 17 people were rescued from the building, including 7 children. So it's one of those things that the Russians will say, well, we weren't aiming at the residential buildings, but, so that's fine, right? We can still aim at what we think are bona fide targets within a capital city. And that you shoot them down with your own air defences and they fall on civilian districts, that's your problem, not ours. No, mate. That's your problem, as in that's your moral problem. Like, if there's a bird on the roof of my neighbour's house, say there's a pigeon on the roof, and I've got an issue because I hate pigeons, right, and I start throwing stones at that pigeon, and I break all of my neighbour's windows. Like, my neighbour comes out and says, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, the wind came along and it knocked out, or you told me, you put me off my throwing of the stones because you told me not to throw stones. So they then went through your window. That's your fault." Like, no, it's my fault for throwing stones at that pigeon that I have an issue with. So, this kind of idea, sorry, that was a really strained analogy there. It's just off the top of my head. But the idea that, and you see this quite a lot, that the Russians can blame the Ukrainians for outcomes of air defense striking down missiles that then hit residential areas. To blame the Ukrainians for that is despicable, when these missiles are aiming at things either very close to residential properties or aren't actually aimed at genuine military concerns anyway. I mean, it's also dubious, especially when you look at, the fact that they were trying to aim at the sewage works the other day, and you're thinking that's not a military target. So, in my book, the Russians are fully at fault for all and every anything that happens within Ukraine. End of. The aftermath of the Russian missile attack on Kyiv last night. Look at the size of the crater. So this is a residential area. So this goes to what I was just talking about. Many elderly people live there. Imagine how scared they were. Most apartments in that building don't have windows now in the winter. So that's a big old crater. And that is what happens when you send ballistic missiles into a capital city. And then another attack on Odessa, and I figured this is where the drones were aiming for. 2 people were hospitalized after loitering munitions hit the region. Officials report damage to civil infrastructure and a fire they say was quickly extinguished. So this was Chornomorsk, a port in the Odessa region on the coast, and around there, Malodonetsky. This is Tim White reporting on that last night, so that was quite early that happened. During that night, the Air Defense Forces shot down 9 Shahed drones. I say early. It's not early because they're a few hours on from us. During the night, Air Defense Forces shot down 9 Shahed drones over Odessa. So there's obviously one Shahed somewhere else. One of the downed drones fell on the territory of the municipal auto repair enterprise in Odessa. Debris of another drone damaged one of the buildings in the port infrastructure. So usual stuff there, I guess. Right, moving on to other bits and pieces, and this is really significant. I reported on this yesterday, but this is actually much bigger than one might have thought, and certainly much bigger than I reported. So Kyivstar, which is Ukraine's largest mobile operator, was hacked yesterday by the Russians. And that was huge because actually mobile infrastructure was then compromised, and that affects all sorts of things like pay terminals, banking, so that shops were unable to I mean, this basically has a huge economic impact. So not only does Kyivstar have 24 million customers or more, the leading bank, Monobank, that has 7 million customers, was also, by extension, hit. And that Russian disruption effort was pretty substantial. Kyivstar says its IT infrastructure was partially destroyed. The goal was maximum damage, unknown when the full service will resume. Monobank faced heavy DDoS attacks. So DDoS are when you try and flood systems with hundreds of thousands of hits at the same time. So you have all these bots and you hit a website and it can't handle it and it kind of breaks down. That's broadly what a DDoS attack is. It can take different forms, but attacking so heavy DDoS attacks targeting Amazon entry points, that was repelled within 40 minutes. Attacks caused issues across banking, transit and utilities, but air raid warnings were unaffected as the system doesn't rely on Kyivstar. This year, Ukraine has faced 4,000 cyber attacks, most attributed to Russia, with war's cyberfront active daily. Resilience persists as Ukrainians adapt. Now, on the other hand, the Ukrainians hit... just to finish off, Russian hackers were from the group Solnichek, and they've taken responsibility for that. It's noted that the hacker team has penetrated the network of the operator. During the attack, the internal network of the operator... my phone is just going. Bear with me a second. Now, where was I? Interrupted by real life. Anyway, during the attack, the internal network infrastructure of the organization was destroyed, which provides communication not only to millions of subscribers, but also to the air view. So this affects the army as well. This was a huge attack, and it was an effective attack and a problematic attack for the Ukrainians across the board. So don't underestimate what happened yesterday. Massively significant. On the other hand, as I was going to say, Ukraine says it wiped out the Russian tax data in their own cyber offensive. Experts say restoring Russia's tax system could take at least a month after Ukraine's reported attack. So the cyber attack infected all the servers with malware, paralyzing communication between the central Moscow offices and 2,300 regional Russian tax offices, as well as between the FTS and the IT company office.ed/it.ru that served as a tax data center, according to HUR. They stated the attacks completely destroyed the infrastructure of a core Russian state agency and numerous associated tax data over an extended period. Additionally, Russia's nationwide tax data traffic is now under Ukraine's military intelligence record. HUR remarks that the attacks effectively eliminated configuration files built up over years that enabled the FTS's extensive system to function, wiping out the entire database and backup copies. The Russians have been unsuccessfully trying to restore the tax service for 4 days in a row, according to experts. A paralysis in the work of the FTS of the Russian Federation will last at least a month. At the same time, the complete resuscitation of the aggressor state's tax system is impossible. That itself could be massive. Like, all of the they need to be able to take tax in to prosecute the war, and if their whole tax system has been compromised and is unable to be used for a month, I don't know what the actual tangible effects on taking money in will be, and on the effect of future tax activities. I don't know what that will be, but I imagine this is a significant attack by the Ukrainians, and we probably saw the Russian attack as a retaliation to this attack. So this it seems to have taken place over the last 4 days, whereas the Russian attack took place yesterday. So I imagine Russia went, right, let's retaliate for this and let's hammer Ukraine. And they have done so. So this is a significant attack on the Russians being met with a significant attack on the Ukrainians, and both having really big tangible effects. And I just want to point you towards a video by Julia Davis, which is on her YouTube channel. And it's 10 minutes of hate. This is 10 minutes of politicians, Russian politicians and Russian propagandists telling you how it is as far as they're concerned. This is their justification of murdering Ukrainians, of a proportion of the Ukrainian population necessarily being eliminated. Like there's so many people in the Ukrainian society who will not accept Russian dominance, and so therefore the only thing you can do is kill them. And this is 10 minutes of, essentially, if you copy this URL, every time someone like, I've banned him recently, Clive Engel, but any time like Pom G or Kev, whatever the numbers are, or I don't know, Nikos G, anytime these people in Russian, pro-Kremlin voices, anytime, or not just on my threads, anywhere, show them this video. Every time they say something, show them this video. Say, look, stop with your nonsense, right? I want you to morally justify this. And if you can't morally justify what your politicians are, or sorry, not yours, because of course you're pretending to be not Russian. So if you can't justify what the aggressors are doing in attacking Ukraine, if you can't justify what the politicians of that nation are saying should happen, and if you can't justify what the propagandists on TV are saying should happen, then you are as much as a moral monster as these people, because you are attacking Ukraine for defending their sovereign territorial integrity against these people. And this is what these people are saying. So if you are not with Ukraine, you are with Russia. And if you are with Russia, you are with these voices. And if you can't justify them, you are a moral monster. And so anyone who gives you the old, Zelensky's this or Ukraine's this, show them this video. 10 minutes of pure vitriol, vile, disgusting hate peddled by the Russian government, since many of these are politicians in Russia and Russian state-sanctioned television. This is the message that the Kremlin sanctions. I'm not going to play it as 10 minutes of hate, but it's a useful tool to throw out there. And finally, another plane a Russian plane has struggled. This is an Aeroflot plane, twice failed to fly to Thailand. This is a 15th breakdown in December alone. Russian airlines continue to scare passengers with technical conditions of their planes. Aeroflot's Boeing of the Krasnoyarsk Phuket flight twice failed to leave the airport. The airplane, with 387 passengers on board, was towed for takeoff. For the 13 hours, passengers could not get into the air. This is a 15th breakdown case of Russian civilian airplanes in December alone. And, of course, just to let you know that Thailand is a favoured destination for Russians at the moment. You've got Turkey, you've got Thailand, and, of course, talking about Russian propagandists, they're even advocating going to North Korea. Yeah, great holiday destination that would be. Anyway, that's enough from me for the first video. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate your support. It means an awful lot. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.